Jacob's story isn't just about mowers, tea, and awkward moments. It's about navigating the complexity of human connections. As he unravels the ties that bind him to Mrs. Clark and his father, he learns that sometimes the hardest part of growing up is not just facing mistakes, but forgiving them and moving forward. Hi everyone, I'm Jessica, the storyteller on the Adult Women's Tales channel. Here, I'll share stories about love, conflicts, betrayal, and infidelity within families. These stories offer a deep look into relationships and the challenges families face. Stay tuned and explore with me. If you love emotional stories and want to uncover the hidden secrets in families, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our videos. I have to confess, I'm not typically the type to lend a hand to my neighbors, but that summer morning, with the sun slowly rising over our peaceful suburb and my dad's old lawnmower rumbling under my grip, something shifted. I stood by the fence, catching a fleeting glimpse of her from the corner of my eye, Mrs. Clark. In the neighborhood, she was simply known as Linda from the Maple House, 52 years old, always graceful, with a hint of quiet weariness in her eyes. My mom often mentioned her time teaching literature at the local college, but after her husband passed away, she seemed to disappear from the public eye. Yet, there was an essence to her, a beauty that had not diminished with time, but rather intensified. Jacob. Her voice drifted over the fence, soothing and harmonious. I turned off the mower and wiped the sweat from my forehead. Absolutely, my lawnmower is giving me trouble once more. Could you please check this out, if you have a moment to spare? It was the very first moment I caught a glimpse of her smile in person. She grasped a glass of lemonade, her expression revealing a hint of hesitation. Not the unapproachable Mrs. Clark that everyone was a bit hesitant to inquire about her well-being. No, she appeared genuine. Absolutely. I'll wrap things up here and make my way over. I mentioned, making an effort to keep my enthusiasm in check. Her yard resembled a scene from a glossy publication, yet the mower lay forsaken amidst the lush greenery, lifeless. I crouched low, inspected the filter, and examined the fuel tank. It didn't matter what was wrong with it. The aroma of mint in the air had already enchanted me. Her aura, the melody of her voice drifting from the porch. "Do you believe it's gone for good?" She made a playful remark. "It seems to be quite dated, just like everything else in this place." I spoke and instantly felt a wave of anxiety that she could be offended, yet she merely chuckled. She became silent, lingering on the porch, observing me. And then she uttered a phrase that momentarily halted my entire existence. "Please, come inside. The tools are inside. I would like to have a conversation." The house was neat, yet it carried a serene stillness that hinted at a person accustomed to solitude. Photos on the mantel, featuring her alongside a cheerful man, books piled haphazardly around, a pile of knitting left on a chair. Then, out of nowhere, there was quiet. I glanced back and noticed her poised in the doorway. Now dressed in pajamas adorned with Mickey Mouse, she has traded her casual shirt from earlier. I stood still. She likely was in the middle of changing and didn't anticipate my quick arrival. "Oh!" she exclaimed, gripping a robe tightly. "I didn't realize you were already in here." "It's all good," I stuttered. "Cozy sleepwear," she chuckled, honestly, with a touch of shyness, not playfulness, and in some way, that made her even more relatable. In that moment, she was neither a legend nor an idealized figure. She was merely a woman. For some reason, I found that even more appealing. She offered tea. I would really appreciate that. We strolled into the kitchen. She placed the kettle on the stove while I took a seat at the table, where 2 magazines were spread out. One focused on gardening, the other packed with crossword puzzles. The aroma of lemon and mint gradually permeated the space. Linda softly poured the tea and carefully set the cups in front of us. "I brought this tea back from New Mexico," she said. "My friend insists it alleviates loneliness. I don't subscribe to that sort of belief. Why not give it a shot?" I grinned and took a sip. The tea had a bold flavor, accompanied by a subtle bitterness. However, the tea wasn't the important part. It was the way we faced one another, in quietude. Take your time. I typically don't allow others into my space, she remarked. Particularly young males who could be my son. Indeed, my previous son. He survived. He simply vanished from my life. She halted, gazing into the steam ascending from her cup. Her voice was firm, yet an unspoken quiver lingered beneath the surface. He has departed 5 years back, didn't specify the location. Each year he mails a postcard, return address not provided. This year from the arid landscape, last year from the great state of Alaska. He roams, and I remain in anticipation. You're not alone, I stated. You're simply authentic. She gazed at me intently for an extended moment, then grinned in an impolite manner, but she truly meant it. You have a talent for writing, not really into lawns. I'm keeping that career path in consideration, I replied. We shared a laugh. Within that laughter lay something unremarkable, straightforward, yet vibrant. Once we wrapped up our tea, she pointed out the location of the tools. A wrench, a screwdriver, and a can of WD-40. I collected all my things and made my way to her motionless mower. The sun was rising higher in the sky. The clock struck 12. Genuine warmth in July. For the first time in ages, I found myself not wanting to go home. Once we had savored our tea, the cup still radiating warmth, and the atmosphere rich with notes of jasmine and vanilla, I rose, expressed my gratitude, and took the toolbox from the hallway. Mrs. Clark quietly guided me to the door. We shared a look that conveys deeper meaning than any words could express. Daylight lingered, and a promise awaited fulfillment. To determine the issue with her obstinate lawnmower, the heat outside remained relentless. If anything, it had become denser, more substantial. I knelt beside her old Toro, removed the engine cover, inspected the spark plug, the fuel tank, and the air filter. All appeared to be in order. However, when I attempted to initiate it, there was no response, not a single cough. The quiet was offensive. It felt as if the machine was taunting me. 60 minutes went by. Next one, and yet another. I even took out my phone and searched for tutorials on YouTube, but it seemed that this particular model was so outdated that even the internet had abandoned it. It resembled an artifact from the Mayflower era. As the sun began to dip below the rooftops, a familiar voice reached my ears. Jacob. It was my mother. She approached from our house, carrying a tray of pastries. Glancing at me from the sidewalk as if I were a stray, she hesitated to feed. What brings you to Linda's place? I settled onto the grass, brushed my hands against my jeans, and made an effort to avoid appearing like a teenage troublemaker caught in the act. The lawnmower is not working. I attempted to resolve the issue. Honestly, what's the situation with our lawn? She inquired, her eyebrows lifted. I haven't tackled that yet, so what's the reason you've been at the neighbors all day? Due to this, she requested assistance. I figured, why not give it a shot? She stands alone. She gazed at me for what felt like an eternity. Then a gentle warmth appeared in her expression. Perhaps it was the sound of my voice, or perhaps she was simply taken aback that I was assisting someone other than myself. Then Mrs. Clark shouted from her porch, "Good evening, Mrs. Miller. Care to join us for a delightful cup of tea? I have lemon bars." Jacob had a fondness for them. I looked over at Mom. She paused. However, amidst the delicious treats and intrigue surrounding the neighbors' personal affairs, pastries consistently triumphed. She styled her hair, cleared away the unseen flour from her apron, although she had not engaged in baking, and came in after me. The house still had the essence of a memory, cozy, somewhat used, yet reassuring. Once more, Mrs. Clark arranged the table meticulously. "Additional tea, please." herbs with a stronger aroma. However, on this occasion, pies, delicious treats, and even a small glass bottle of what she referred to, simply for the sake of color, a type of crafted liqueur made at home. Mom and Mrs. Clark connected right away. They reminisced about former neighbors, shared a good laugh about the hilarious mishaps at the block party. I simply remained seated, enjoying my tea while observing these two women, completely distinct, strangely alike in their subtle power. Eventually, Mom glanced at me with that same knowing smirk. "You'll be completing our lawn first thing in the morning. Isn't that so?" "Absolutely," I stated. Initially, following that, "Feel free to assist Linda with anything that remains." "Agreed." I grinned. Mrs. Clark gave a playful wink. Mom enjoyed another sip, clearly delighted. What about me? An unexpected sensation began to awaken within me. A warmth that eluded my understanding. I desired to be present, not because of obligation, by selection, out of, I'm not sure, authentic and genuine. The evening lingered well into the twilight hours. As we finally emerged into the open air, the stars were twinkling in the night sky. The air was crisper than it had been all day, as if the entire universe had released a breath. "You're aware." As we strolled home, Mom remarked, "Today, you made a positive impact. You might want to consider visiting Mrs. Clark more frequently. She is an admirable woman." "I'm aware," I stated. I truly meant it. The early rays of sunlight were filtering through the blinds as I got out of bed. My legs were heavy and unresponsive. However, I had given my word. That meant it was time for me to mow. 2 times, I slipped into a t-shirt, snagged a granola bar. Then I made my way outside. Our backyard was not in terrible condition. However, Mom would have spotted even the slightest defiant blade of grass. After 35 minutes had passed, the mower has been parked in the garage, picked up the vintage manual version, the noisy one that howled around corners more dramatically than a boiling pot. I headed over to Mrs. Clark's house. The yard appeared even more inviting in the morning light. The flowers were at their peak of beauty. The white porch appeared as if it was straight out of a romantic novel's cover. Once I set foot on the walkway, the entrance swung wide. She stood there in a whimsical pink robe adorned with playful cartoon cats. "Greetings, Jacob." She beamed. "Let's have tea later." "Absolutely. Just give me 30 minutes. I'll wrap up the front lawn and then we can relax together." I returned the smile. "Absolutely flawless." She gave a playful wink. "I'll aim for a milder approach this time." I chuckled and dove into my tasks. The mower let out a series of creaks and groans. However, it accomplished what it needed to. After 25 minutes had passed, I brushed the perspiration off my brow and made my way to the door. I rapped on the door. "Step inside." From within, Mrs. Clark's voice resonated. I stood still. The previous occasion she mentioned that things became uncomfortable. Gently, I pushed the door open. "It's me, Jacob." I entered and stuck once more. She was midway up the staircase, putting on a sweater. And indeed, once more, I witnessed more than I should have. "Wow, seriously, here we go again," she chuckled. "Do you possess a unique skill for catching me in the act of changing?" I didn't intend to, I promise. I spoke without thinking, shielding my face with my hand. It seems like bad timing is just part of who I am. Her laughter was so infectious that I couldn't help but join in. The tension vanished in an instant. Moments later, we found ourselves at her kitchen table, each with a steaming cup of tea in hand. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, collecting dust particles that resemble shimmering glitter in the air. She donned a cozy sweater paired with jeans. Her hair was slightly tousled, yet in a stunning manner. "Thanks for your assistance." She spoke gently, softly exhaling over her cup of tea. It's rare to find individuals who lend a hand without expecting anything in return. I simply shrugged. It's no big deal. I enjoy assisting others, and you are. That's quite intriguing. She lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. Intriguing? That's a nice way of saying I'm quirky and chatty, something that blends intrigue with humor. I smiled broadly. She gazed out the window, and a change flickered in her gaze. I haven't always been this way, she murmured. What do you mean? This serene, consistent. At the age of 22, I reached my lowest point. I was staying with a friend, resting on a sofa, juggling 3 jobs. No one provided me with a cup of tea or took care of my lawn. Honestly, absolutely serious. I rotated between 3 t-shirts, survived on quick meals, yet I persevered. There was no alternative for me. I remained silent. This version of her was difficult to envision. In stark contrast to the self-assured woman before me, you managed to stay composed, I stated. She offered a faint smile tinged with sadness. At times, I find myself considering that different moments. I'm a bit uncertain. We lingered in silence for a while longer, then she rose to her feet. Okay, let's move on from the deep thoughts. Your lawn needs some attention. It won't take care of itself. Jacob's eyes grew large. I assisted her personally. He admitted the truth. And you're aware it almost shattered our family. She has a knack for ensnaring others in her intricate designs. The room was enveloped in silence. Jacob reminisced about his childhood moments. Subtle signs and restless nights as his parents engaged in hushed yet intense disputes. Perhaps, he murmured softly to himself. Mrs. Clark had something in mind with either me or Dad. That kiss on the cheek now felt intentional. The evening transformed into night. Jacob reclined in bed, attempting to release his swirling thoughts, yet slumber eluded me. He rolled and shifted restlessly, reflecting on all that has transpired and considering what lies ahead. At last, it was only with the break of dawn that his thoughts began to settle somewhat, and he drifted off to sleep with a weighty yet unclouded heart. On that serene Saturday morning, all was still, the kind when the sun softly spread its warm embrace across the neighborhood, coating everything in a gentle hue of gold. Jacob had stepped outside, with a toolbox ready, concentrated on repairing the fence directly in front of Mrs. Clark's residence. The aged timber had experienced more glorious times. Sounding off with creaks and groans, urgently requires fixing. While he pounded and fine-tuned the aged boards, an unmistakable stare caught his attention. As I glanced through the slightly ajar window, Mrs. Clark's face came into view, enveloped by luminous drapes. "Greetings, Jacob," she called with a bright tone. Her voice was cozy and welcoming. Jacob brushed the sweat from his forehead and returned the smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Clark. Feel free to step in for some tea when you're finished." She extended her offer. Her tone exuded a welcoming warmth that was difficult to ignore. Jacob paused briefly. The words of his father resonated within him, advising him regarding the woman's standing, concerning the dangers of proximity. However, the spirit of youth and the thirst for knowledge had different ideas. "Absolutely. I'll arrive shortly," he responded. He looked back at the fence and made a quiet vow to himself to wrap things up swiftly. As Jacob entered Mrs. Clark's house, he immediately sensed a change in the atmosphere compared to before. Gentler, more comfortable, infused with the aroma of freshly brewed tea and a subtle hint of floral notes. She appeared luminous, nothing like the 52-year-old widow he had envisioned. Instead, a tall and slender woman who could effortlessly be mistaken for someone in her 40s. The light twirled playfully through her dark hair. Her smile came naturally. It was as though she carried an infinite reservoir of happiness within her. Suddenly, as Jacob turned to hang up his jacket, he noticed Mrs. Clark adjusting her blouse in a manner that seemed intentional this time. She was open and unreserved. The bold look she cast back at Jacob left him momentarily paralyzed. "Wow, she's stunning," he thought, his heart racing. For a brief instant, he found himself at a loss for words. The space felt more confined, filled with an undeniable energy that demanded attention. They transitioned to the living room. Before long, a teapot began to pour gentle streams of golden liquid into fine cups. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly. Mrs. Clark shared details about her life. Her early years were a blend of joy and struggle, her enthusiasm for early runs, and how she had found yoga to maintain her mental tranquility. She shared her thoughts on the solitude that accompanied her extended time living by herself. Yet it was also about the little pleasures she held dear. Her eyes glimmered as she gazed at Jacob, not with the careful distance of a watchful neighbor, yet infused with the authentic kindness of a companion. At a certain moment, she extended her hand and brushed it against his gently, a warm, comforting gesture that caused Jacob's heart to race. She chuckled. an unmistakable, captivating melody that illuminated the space like rays of sunlight. Jacob suddenly became aware Mrs. Clark was more than a solitary widow. She was a woman brimming with tales and allure, a person capable of transforming the significance of his Saturdays completely. Out of nowhere, the phone started ringing. Jacob's device. It was his dad. He responded promptly. "Jacob, I could use your assistance right now. Would you be able to stop by?" His father's voice was steady, yet held a clear sense of urgency. Jacob looked over at Mrs. Clark, who gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes glimmering with that playful spark once more. "I'll be right there," he said, rising to his feet. Mrs. Clark escorted him to the door. Just as he was about to step away, she wrapped her arms around him in a soft hug and placed a brief kiss on his cheek. Jacob paused momentarily, his thoughts swirling rapidly. As he turned to leave, the brisk air brushed against his skin, and the heaviness of understanding sank profoundly within him. He had walked straight into Mrs. Clark's trap. On that Saturday, the sun loomed large in the sky, stretching long shadows across the tranquil neighborhood. Once I wrapped up tea with Mrs. Clark, I quietly exited her home, my mind swirling with confusion. She had an undeniable allure, excessively alluring. It wasn't solely her smile or the way she chuckled at my jokes. There was an underlying essence, a perilous situation. I caught Dad working on the gutter of our shed, softly humming a classic Bruce Springsteen tune to himself. Upon seeing me, he silently passed me a wrench. We collaborated closely for some time, exchanging few words. Yet the questions were searing through my mind. "Father?" I finally spoke up, repositioning the ladder. "May I pose a question to you? Information regarding Mrs. Clark." He stood still, only for a moment. His eyes squinted as if he were assessing the best path through a dangerous obstacle course. "What's the deal with her? You mentioned that I wasn't the first guy she brought in." "You mentioned that you assisted her previously. Could you clarify what you meant by that?" He cast a lingering glance my way, then let out a sigh and settled onto the edge of the tool chest. "Jake, there are certain matters that are best forgotten. Let's go," I urged. "I must find out. Was there an incident involving the two of you?" A moment of silence lingered, just the right length for a bird to flit by us, long enough for my heart to thump like a steady rhythm. Father gazed at his palms. "It happened ages ago, back when you were still in high school. While your mom was away for a week, Mrs. Clark required assistance with a broken light fixture. She welcomed me inside. One event unfolded into the next. I gulped deeply. And you?" He avoided giving a straightforward response. He gazed into the trees as if they could shield him from his guilt. "That was an error. Your mother was never aware. Yet I hold it close every single day." I took a step back. My throat was constricted, my hands clenched tightly into fists. Dad has always been the guiding light for our family, disciplined yet principled. "What's this all about now?" She pressed her lips against mine. I whispered under my breath, "Absolutely, on the cheek. However, there's more to it, right?" He didn't agree. There was no need for him to do that. "You're upset," he remarked softly. "Naturally, I'm upset. I lost it. You nearly destroyed this family, and now she's repeating the same behavior with me." Father rose to his feet. "Jacob, pay attention to what I'm saying. Mrs. Clark. She feels isolated. She's not a terrible person. However, she has faced numerous challenges. It seems she might be in search of something. Link. Cozy. Fine. However, caution is essential. Don't mistake her focus for affection." I turned away, shaking my head, tools firmly held in my grasp. I wasn't looking for advice. I wasn't looking for perspective. I sought the truth. It seemed as though everyone nearby was too hesitant to offer it. That night, I was wide awake. I reclined in bed, gazing at the ceiling fan as it turned in languid circles of uncertainty. I revisited each moment with Mrs. Clark, the appearance, the beverage, the giggles, the gentle pecks on the cheek. Was everything planned out? Was I merely another pawn ensnared in her trap? Sunday went by without a single word to her. I remained inside, feigning the need to study, neglecting my phone, steering clear of the windows. On Monday, I took care of mowing our backyard, but I didn't venture across the street, not a single look in the direction of her porch. A complete week went by in that manner. Each day, I found myself peering at her home from behind the drapes. Once I spotted her walking her dog and quickly hid behind the fridge like a child trying to avoid his crush. I felt absurd, yet I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. She shared her story with me. Concerning the operations and feelings of isolation, I had faith in her. I noticed the hurt in her gaze when she believed I wasn't watching. But what if it was merely a performance on her part? Dad attempted to reach out to me again during the week, but I dismissed him. I wasn't prepared to let go of my anger towards him, not at this moment. I replayed the entire situation in my mind, looking for clarity. Was I deceived? Or had I merely allowed my creativity to soar? By Friday night, I felt completely drained, not from work or school, but from contemplation, excessive contemplation, examining each term closely, each movement, each glance. I lounged on my bed, fixated on my phone. I didn't send her a message. She didn't send me a message. It seemed like a showdown, or perhaps the conclusion of something that never truly started. The porch light outside began to flicker on. I noticed her outline shifting within the home. The manner in which she tucked her hair behind her ear, she meticulously folded the laundry in the living room. Ordinary matters, things related to humanity. I felt the urge to knock on her door. I was curious about what I represented to her. However, I also aimed to safeguard my own interests from her, from whatever this was turning into. I reclined once more, gaze fully alert, heart feels burdened. That night, I experienced no dreams. I simply drifted in the shadows, questioning whether I had misplaced something I never truly possessed, or if I was finally emerging from a dream I never should have pursued in the beginning. It was a Saturday morning. Before I could fully shake off the remnants of sleep, my mom knocked on my door and spoke with a firm tone. "Jacob, Mrs. Clark is looking for your assistance with cleaning out her garage. I mentioned you would arrive." I almost gasped for air. "What about you? Could you repeat that?" She reached out to me. Mom responded with a sense of calm. She mentioned that she was having a hard time. It's hard to refuse a woman who has battled cancer, particularly when she finds herself by herself. Show kindness. I wanted to express that I had other commitments to attend to. I wasn't prepared, but Mom had already turned away, not expecting a response. The journey to Mrs. Clark's house seemed to stretch on endlessly. It felt as though the grass was silently critiquing my every move. I strolled up to the gate, inhaled deeply, and rapped. The door swung open in no time at all. "Hello, Jacob," she spoke softly. "It's great to see you here." I simply nodded. We made our way to the garage without a word. It truly was chaotic. Containers, vintage equipment, musty coverings, albums with frayed edges. I began sifting through the clutter. She cleaned the shelves. We collaborated closely. Yet the distance between us seemed like an immense chasm. She observed the distance in my demeanor. "I sensed it. You stand out." At last, she spoke up. When we both reached for a box of light bulbs simultaneously, "It occurs," I whispered, avoiding her gaze. After approximately an hour, she presented me with tea. I intended to decline. Yet there was an undeniable quality in her voice, exhausted, genuine, caused me to concur. We relaxed on her porch. The sun radiated warmth. Yet within me, there is ice. My tea chilled quicker than I could muster the bravery to say a word. "Is everything okay?" she inquired softly. I gulped. The quiet lingered, taut and ready to break at any moment. "Simply let me know." Finally, I spoke up. "Was my father? Did you both share something?" She stood still. "What is going on?" "I understand," I stated. He confessed it. "I'm really unsure about who to trust, him, you, or nobody else." She remained silent for an extended period. She gripped the teacup tightly, as if it were her sole anchor to reality. "Your father assisted me." At last, she spoke up. "Following my separation, I was a complete mess, and he grew closer. However, we did not go beyond the limit. Not entirely. Not entirely." I fired back. I deceived myself into believing it was merely friendship. However, he visited frequently. We would have a conversation, giggle, enjoy a glass of wine. One evening, we found ourselves incredibly intimate. He moved closer. I let him continue. However, your mother caught a glimpse of us through the window. She burst in with the force of a tempest, sent him packing, placed a curse upon me, claimed I was tearing families apart. She felt embarrassed to be my neighbor. I turned my gaze elsewhere. My thoughts were all over the place. "Why didn't you let me know sooner? I was uncertain about what you meant to me." She stated, "Initially, you were simply a young person with a lawnmower. Next, a companion. Subsequently, I began to sense something deeper. I felt fear creeping in." "Terrified of losing you, just like I lost everything else. Is it really all true?" "Indeed it is." She gave a slight nod. "I didn't destroy your family, Jacob. I felt powerless. He was just the same. What occurred was simply part of being human, not malevolent. It was simply an error, a creation of ours together." I gazed at her intently, questioning the trustworthiness of her words. Yet her gaze remained unwavering, and there was no deception in them. Silence enveloped us once more. Yet this time, the silence felt different, not piercing. It was exhausted. It feels like the silence that follows an intense debate when every point has been made and there's nothing more to discuss. I'm unsure how to handle all of this. I spoke softly. "It's not necessary for you to be aware," she stated. "Simply be truthful with yourself and don't keep it all inside. It will linger until you express it verbally." I completed my tea and rose to my feet. "I'm heading out now. Got it?" She gave a slight nod. "However, I have added, I'm finished with running. Simply allow me some time." She gave another nod. "Hardly." Her eyes glistened with tears, yet she remained composed. "I have departed, for the first time, free from anger, free from bitterness." With a weight in my chest and an odd sense of relief, I finally grasped the truth. Mom gave me a silent look when I returned. "I just mentioned. We had a conversation." She gave a nod, as if she had been aware of the reality from the very beginning. She patiently allowed her son to find it by himself. That evening, I stepped into the backyard. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, softly sharing tales from days gone by. I settled onto the weathered bench and pondered. Life isn't always just one way or the other. There are variations, errors, I'm sorry, concerns, emotions. Every experience contributes to our development. I stopped mowing for Mrs. Clark, yet we crossed paths. Occasionally, it's simply a gesture across the boundary. Occasionally, just a word or two. And one day, I found myself sharing tea with her once more, clear and straightforward, free from resentment, simply two individuals who have experienced everything together and stayed human. I had stopped mowing her lawn, yet we continued to meet. Several weeks had gone by. Say goodbye to mowing. Tea is no longer available. Say goodbye to those uncomfortable stares. Mrs. Clark has not requested my assistance again. I didn't go over it myself. It felt as if we had come to an unspoken consensus to pause for a while. We still maintained some connection. We met, occasionally in the garden while she tended to her blooms, occasionally at the shop close to the register. She would give a nod, and I would lift my hand in response. Silence speaks volumes, simply a cozy shared connection. In our perspective, it's not about blame, but rather about acceptance. What needed to occur has occurred. My dad. It had been weeks since I last spoke to him. Quiet enveloped us like a thick mist. He made several attempts. However, I would either choose to walk away or act as if I had something to occupy my time. One evening it was just the two of us in the kitchen while Mom was out with her friends. I have finally come to a halt. Father, I stated, I've moved past my anger. He appeared taken aback. It seems he was caught off guard by my decision to speak first. He set his spoon aside and simply gazed at me. I've given it considerable thought. I continued on. I understand. You had your flaws. However, you're not a bad guy either. Everyone occasionally errs, I believe. You will always be my dad. I truly adore you. I rarely express that. However, I did say it. He took his time to respond. His eyes filled with tears. He then rose to his feet and embraced me. Even as an adult in that moment, I was transported back to feeling like a young boy once more, cradled in his father's embrace, who absolves him for causing damage. Thanks, kiddo, he murmured. I sincerely apologize, and I take pride in your achievements. On Saturday, I visited Tom's place, a friend from my early years. He had just set up a brand new PlayStation 5. We engaged in a match of FIFA, chuckled, debated over the scores. We indulged in pizza and lost track of time. I heard you used to assist Mrs. Clark, he inquired, gaze fixed on the display. Absolutely, I stated, netting yet another goal. Cut her grass, assisted her with various tasks. Some folks consider her unusual. There are many whispers going around. I set the controller aside and let out a deep sigh. She's unique, Tom. She's simply a woman who has faced many challenges. Honestly, it's unfortunate that some individuals are unable to recognize others for their true selves. He took a moment to pause the game, sat in silence, avoiding my gaze. What actually took place between the two of you? I took my time to respond. Then I remarked, all things and absolutely nothing. She revealed to me that adults are not infallible beings, that my dad is capable of making mistakes. My mom has the ability to become furious and yet still find it in her heart to forgive. It's possible to find love in the exchange of words rather than in physical appearances. Sometimes a friend is simply the one who brews tea when you're in pieces. Tom paused in silence for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. That really resonates on a deeper level. Are you up for another round? Absolutely. I'm going with Real Madrid this time. Seriously, not this again. He chuckled. We began playing once more. Yet within, a change had occurred. I had moved past my anger, or embarrassed, or resentful. All that was destined to occur had indeed occurred. I truly felt a sense of gratitude for everything, an unusual, erratic encounter. The following morning, I ventured outside. Mrs. Clark stood beside her flower bed, donning rubber gloves, gripping the pruning shears tightly. Upon seeing me, she paused for a moment, then grinned. I returned the smile, and that sufficed. Sometimes, the most powerful bonds aren't the ones that endure indefinitely. They are the ones who create a legacy of tranquility, a comprehension, perhaps a fresh start. not necessarily in unison, but definitely free of bitterness, according to Tom, who is a friend of Jacob. Once, Jacob and I would kick the soccer ball around on the school field, giggling and rolling around in the soil, as though nothing in existence held more weight than assignments. I've been acquainted with him since the time he gathered toy cars, not recollections, and even though we have aged, embrace the challenges, duties, and anxieties that come with being a man. In my eyes, he's always going to be that same Jake from the neighborhood, genuine, compassionate, and perhaps a tad overly trusting. He proceeded to share this tale with me. Initially, I couldn't grasp why his voice carried such profound silence, more than mere pauses. Yet, it's the type of quiet that hangs in the atmosphere following a dispute, similar to the image in the mirror that you're hesitant to confront. He kept many things to himself, just snippets, instances, reflections. However, it was sufficient for me to assemble the reality. This wasn't a tale of an older woman and a younger man. It wasn't just about her asking him in for tea while wearing her pajamas. It wasn't just the kiss on the cheek that someone spotted from the window. Negative. This narrative delved into something much more tangible, confidential information. Since every family possesses them, some simply excel at concealing them. Some remain silent due to apprehension. Some believe that by ignoring it, the hurt will just fade away. The understanding between Jacob's father and Mrs. Clark wasn't a betrayal in the conventional way. There was no relationship outside of our commitment, no hushed desire in a shadowy space. However, there was a cue. They found themselves at the brink of it, so near that it felt like everything was on the brink of falling apart. Betrayal isn't solely defined by actions. At times, it's a gaze that holds on just a bit too long, an action that remains unfulfilled. Yet it continues to thrive in the realm of imagination, a longing that remains unfulfilled, not because it ought not to. However, it was fortunate that someone intervened at the right moment. Jacob's mother discovered them. That moment preserved a family. What remains in the aftermath? Letdown, doubt, the type of harm that radiates like a fracture in a pane of glass. Quiet, unhurried, unavoidable. Jacob was unable to let go of the past. Not right away. He no longer viewed his father as a steadfast figure, yet as someone who had disrupted the core of their family, and Mrs. Clark as a person who allowed it to unfold. However, time alters circumstances. Ultimately, Jacob recognized the reality that we all have our flaws. Making mistakes doesn't define our character, simply human, and that the most significant harm isn't in falling. It's about not accepting it. When Jacob revealed all of this to me, his reflections, his suffering, the angry teenager was no longer in sight. A man caught my eye, a person who has faced intense challenges and emerged without losing their warmth, a person who has embraced reality and continues to discover tranquility. And I find myself pondering now, how many narratives like this are subtly unfolding all around us? How many dads feel burdened by guilt? How many mothers offer forgiveness in silence? How many kids reach adulthood unaware of how near their families were to breaking down, simply due to the fact that an individual caught a glimpse through a window at the perfect moment? This could simply be a tiny tale amidst the vast, noisy tumult of existence. However, for me, it held significance. The reality is piercing, trims. However, it also provides healing. Secrets grow and thrive in the shadows, much like mold. And if you don't expose them, they'll multiply, building trust, adoration, and recollection. Jacob chose not to run. He didn't destroy everything. He faced it head on. He confronted it. His fury, his quietude, his bewilderment, and moved forward towards something greater, comprehension. And Mrs. Clark, she was no longer a source of controversy. She transformed into something entirely different. Individual, an individual shaped by their history, accompanied by solitude, perhaps the most isolated individual in the neighborhood. Sometimes the most impactful connections go beyond just kisses or breakups. They make an impression. Silence, enduring, where each word counts, and each silence even more so. This tale illustrates just how simple it can be to lose your sense of self, and how much more challenging it is to grant yourself forgiveness. Perhaps that's the essence of growing up. I witnessed my friend transition into adulthood. That's the most genuine statement I can make. That's it for today's story. If you found it moving, don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.